Hey guys, Greg Alexander. Thanks for coming to the channel. And now we're getting into prime time for the technique that I'm getting ready to talk about. And this is a technique that's tried and true. A lot of improvements have been made in it over the years with the type of baits that you have access to over what you had in the past. And we're going to get right into it. What is this technique? Using a suspending jerkbait on winter bass. When's the prime time? The prime time, unless you're in the deep south, the prime time is now. Now. We are now in December. From now until the pre-spawn, this technique will shine. There'll be days when it doesn't work very well. It always works to some degree. Every technique always works to some degree. But there'll be days that it doesn't work. But for the most part, this technique is going to work. What's the magic water temperature for picking up the suspending jerkbait? Well, I like to say about, 50 and down. You can catch them a little bit above that sometimes. But for the most part, 50 and down. You'll have days where it'll dip into the upper 40s for a day or two or three and then go back up in the low 50s for a while. And that kind of gets the fish kind of going in two different directions sometimes. And it may not be, set up to eat a suspending jerkbait as well as it will be once that water temperature kind of gets down and stays down. So now's the time to get out with your suspending jerkbait. So I want to talk about colors, sizes, action, what rod you need, what line you need, what reel you need, where to throw it. That's what we're going to talk about. So let's go over a few baits. Some of the better baits that you can use on a regular basis for jerkbait fishing are going to be any of the Shadow Wrap series, any of the Smithwick Rogue series, any of the McSticks, Vision 110, and the list goes on and on. And every pro and different people like different jerkbaits, but a good high quality jerkbait is going to catch them if it's got a good finish, good paint job, realistic action and look to it. But colors can change, and let's understand that the jerkbait's only going to work at its optimal when the water is clear. When I mean clear, 3 to 4 foot of visibility for the fish at a minimum for it to be very effective. Because a lot of times a jerkbait is drawing fish from a distance away, and if you can't see it 3 or 4 feet away, you're going to miss a lot of fish. It will work in slightly dingier water, but it's probably not going to be your best technique. So that being said, in most situations, when you're dealing with, let's talk about different conditions and what colors you should throw. When you're dealing with a calm, cloudy day, that's probably one of the worst days for jerkbait fishing, calm and cloudy. But you can still catch them, because the problem is it's calm, so you need realism because it's calm and there's no light, wind breaking the surface, confusing the eye of the bass that he can be tricked easier in a bite. So then you need realism. But realism a lot of times is going to come in more shiny type colors. And shiny type colors on cloudy days tend to look a little bit fake to the fish. So that's the worst situation for throwing a jerkbait in cold water, is the calm, cloudy days. A windy, cloudy day is pretty good. You can get away with just about anything on those days. The sunny days, even a calm sunny day can be good. On a calm sunny day, I'm going to throw something really realistic like this ghost minnow color. It's not got a ton of shine to it. It looks like a real fish under those situations. If you got a lot of wind on a sunny day, then you're probably going to go with something chrome blue, chrome orange, or one of these natural reflective colors that has a little reflective line in it like this Shadow Wrap. Now, there's all kinds of variations of different colors that you can throw on that type of day. Now, if you get into like the Ozark area of the country, then for whatever reason, probably the reason that, I've noticed when I've been out in that area in the wintertime and you have a shad kill, that a lot of the shad have like a lavender color to their back. And so in that area, you get a lot of these baits like this Vision 110, which has a purple or lavender color back and a very light but transparent side on it that can draw fish from a long distance away, and then the color pretty much matches the bait that's there. So when would you throw like these brighter colors? Well, a lot of these brighter colors like this solid chartreuse, purple back, are going to be thrown when you're dealing with what I call chalky water. It's not crystal clear, but it's not muddy. It's just chalky. It still has maybe a 3 or 4 foot visibility, but the fish are going to have a hard time seeing something that's really realistic looking in that particular watercolor. So then you're going to want to pull out like a chartreusey type bait like this, or one of these, hand painted deals with chartreuse or yellow and red on one side and oil slick on the other, something like that, or a solid body white color is going to work good in those situations when the water is chalky. Gets to a certain point, again, there's going to be other things that you're going to need to do. If the water gets too dirty, you're not even going to want to do this. So now let's talk about, the importance of different baits. Some of these baits like this Shadow Rap Deep, the package says it goes 5 or 6 feet, and it will go 5 or 6 feet most of the time. But the Shadow Rap is a little different than some of these other jerk baits, in that this is called a slow sinking bait. So this bait, if you stop it, it'll actually start to sink. So you can achieve just about any depth that you want with a bait like the Shadow Rap. And I find that even with the Shadow Rap Shallow, which goes, 2 to 4 feet deep, that I can easily get that to 6 to 7 feet on a long cast with 10-pound fluorocarbon. Easily. I mean, you can see it. If you look on your forward-facing sonar, you can see it's down 6, 7 feet. So they'll go considerably deeper than what the package calls for. These slow sinking models will. When you get in these neutrally buoyant, you got neutrally buoyant baits like the Smithwick Rogue. This is neutrally buoyant. So you drag this down and it's just going to stop. It's not going to float up. It's not going to float down. And it's going to usually sit a little bit nose down like that in the water. And if you want it to slowly sink, or some other bait that maybe is not sinking fast enough for you, you're really trying to get really deep, then you can use things like suspend dots. This is a little lead tacky strip, or if you need a little bit more weight, they make suspend strips. It's like a strip of adhesive lead. And you can put that, a lot of times you want that on the throat or under the bill of the bait, because you want the bait to sit like this. You don't want the bait to sit like this in the water or even dead flat. Sitting nose down seems to be the best way to draw strikes for a bait that's sitting still. Now there's another color that you can use if you're in certain situations. That situation would be small lakes and ponds or tannic river situations. A bait that works really well in these situations is orange and brown. An orange and brown jerkbait will absolutely destroy the fish in a tannic situation, because the bait in those situations is tannic. Everything's orangey, everything's brown, so you're matching the hatch. Now when you talk about working a jerkbait, when the water's a little bit warmer in the 50s and you first start throwing a jerkbait, maybe even a floater or a neutrally buoyant one, and you're just getting reaction strikes from shallower fish like you would with a square bill or any other type of bait, then you're going to work that bait pretty quick. You're going to be snapping your rod, pop, pop, pause, pop, pause, pop, 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 pause, but you're going to move it really quick, and you're going to have a very short pause period of time in there. You're not going to have a long pause, because the fish are going to be active, and anyone that's willing to eat is eagerly going to chase it down and eat it. But as the water temperature drops, you want to slow it down, in, direct relationship to the temperature of the water. So as you get to 50 degrees, now you're going to pop it, maybe still pop it about the same, but you're going to give it a longer pause. And as it gets down into like the mid 40s, you don't even want to snap it real hard at that time. You want to start just bumping the bait. Because the bait in that 45-degree water temperature, it's not going to look natural to them at all, because the whole system has slowed down. The bait is slowed down, and nobody's jumping around like that. So you want to slow it down and just kind of bump the bait instead of snapping the rod, snapping it down. You want to bump the bait just a little bit at a time. And then you want to slow down your pauses. You hear up to 30 seconds or even longer sometimes. Difficult to do. Very difficult to do. It takes a lot of patience. But I'll tell you, some of the best fish I've ever caught on a jerkbait have been when I was like, man, letting it sit there and sit there and sit there. And now, if you're fishing in a boat and you're equipped with forward-facing sonar, you can really kind of monitor the situation. You can actually follow your bait back, and you can see if a fish is coming up to look at it. If you don't have the fish coming up to look at it, you just got to go based on, instinct and what people have always done. You just trial and error. And so that obviously is going to make it a little bit easier on how to approach the fish. And if you have forward-facing sonar on your boat and you're seeing your jerkbait and you're seeing how you're working it, and you realize that, man, when I do this or when I do that or when I pause it longer or when I jerk it just a little bit harder, then that's when the fish bites it. Then it kind of keys you in onto the mood of the fish and the things that they would be looking, what would trigger them into biting. So let's talk about the rod, reel, and line setup for suspending jerkbait. Now, as far as a reel goes, pretty much any reel will do for you for a jerkbait, especially suspending jerkbait in the wintertime, because speed is not the issue. You just need one that, you don't want like a 4 or 5 to 1 deep cranking reel on there, for example, because you just can't really take up the line fast enough when you hook a fish to stay with them. So, 6 something to 1 or 7 something to 1 would be plenty enough to handle this situation. And the rod, now here's the key with, people want to go out there and fish a jerkbait with a 7-foot or 7-6 rod because they want to make these, these longer casts. And that's great for longer casts. But the problem with a jerkbait is your rod is always point down to the water. So if your rod is too long, then you're going to have a time keeping your tip from hitting the water or the side of your boat. So for me, and I'm 6'2", 6'3", for me, a 6'6" rod or 6'8" at the most is the right size for a jerkbait, because I can jerk it without the tip of my rod constantly hitting on the water, getting in the way of the boat and things like that. So that for me is the best size. A little shorter than normal is best for jerking a jerkbait around. Even, in the summertime, if you're jerking a jerkbait around, same thing. Line, man, I'm going to use probably 10-pound fluorocarbon most of the time. Now, I might go up to 12 if I'm in an area where I think I'm going to be dealing with a lot of bigger fish. And I may go down to 8 if it's really cold. I need to get the bait a little bit deeper, quicker, so that I'm not waiting all day for it to sink. And the fish are pressured and line shy, and you need the most action on the smallest twitch. You'll get more action. The lighter your line is, the more action you'll get into your bait, because it just restricts the flow or the movement of the bait if you have heavy line on there. Like if you tied a extension cord on there, you'd get no movement, simple as that. And the rod itself, I like this one. This is a moderate action rod, which means it bends from the tip at least halfway down the rod. And that's what you want with a jerkbait. Very forgiving rod. It'll help you cast. It'll also help you on light line control the fish's runs and things like that without him pulling the hooks out of his mouth. So what makes jerkbaits different? Well, take this Vision 110 for example. This Vision 110 is extremely lifelike. It has a very narrow body. And what does that narrow body do? That narrow body makes this bait not roll as much. This bait has a tighter wobble, just like a Fritz side crankbait has a tighter wobble than a wigglewort. Like a rattle trap has a tighter wobble than a bandit crankbait. It has a little tighter wobble. And what we know about baits in general in the wintertime is that tighter wobble tends to draw more strikes. So this is going to be a real good wintertime bait. Now on the other hand, you got this Lucky Craft jerkbait, which is a big round body. This bait has a lot of action. This bait really moves from side to side. And this bait is going to be better when you're dealing with a little bit warmer water and a higher activity level in the bass. And then you got some of these middle of the road ones here, like the McStick, which is just a slight bit wider than the Vision 110, but they have very similar actions. And for my money, you know, I'll take the $12 McStick over the $25 Vision 110 for my money. They both catch them about the same in my opinion. And then you got the Smithwick Rogue, which is like probably got some of the most action of any of the jerkbaits. The problem with the Rogue is it just doesn't have the best finish and paint job, you know, on the market. You know, a lot of these Rogues, a lot of these people will take these Rogues and custom paint them to get the finish to go with the action that they're looking at. And then probably the best all-around suspending jerkbait, in my opinion, because it has good action and it's subtle at the same time, is these Shadow Raps. I really have come to like these Shadow Raps. This is a deep, probably what you're going to throw mostly is the deep one in the wintertime, although you can throw the shallow one because, like I said earlier, they're sinking baits. So you can get them down, if you're patient enough, you can get them down to any depth that you want. And one more trick that you can use if you're trying to get your bait down deeper, like this Rogue, for example, which is only going to go, you know, about 6 foot without some help because it's a neutral buoyant, is if you don't have any suspend dots or suspend strips, then the simplest way to get it down deeper is to take that front hook off, this is a 6, and put a 4 on there. And that'll get you about another foot or so of depth doing it that way. So here's the final point I want to make on jerkbaits. Now that you know what different jerkbaits do what rod to use, what reel to use, what line to use, the different colors in different situations, what do you do now? Do you just go out and throw it any old where? No, because you have to understand the seasonal patterns, right? The seasonal patterns this time of year in most lakes and rivers are the fish are going to go to a very stable area with deeper, clearer water for the most part, while some fish are going to stay in dirty water all year long. We understand that. And they're going to get around something that they can go up and down on real quick. In a lot of situations, that's going to be timber in some of your lakes, so timber edges, bluffs and bluff ends, underwater drop-offs, big boulders, front of marinas and dock areas, but they have to have, you know, generally want to be south facing so that they get the sun. So they're going to want to be somewhere where there's a vertical structure that they can relate to for winter, so they don't have to travel any horizontal distances. They just want to be able to go up and down in the water column. So go find those types of areas in your lake with some clear water. So get your jerkbait rod out and go after them, and you could possibly catch some of the biggest fish you will catch this winter. Again, thanks for watching and have a blessed day.